how wonderful it is to see what practice does in your ATM teaching. Yeah? Just to see the difference in every one of you as the process is continued. It's wonderful to see. And, you know, to know that there's no way around practice. And I don't necessarily mean that you have to have been teaching, but that just your practice on yourself. No? That ability for you to be more present, no? Calmer. Okay. Come up to standing. Sorry, Sarah. You just look so comfortable there. Go for a walk and get a sense of what's happening in your upper torso and your shoulders as you walk. So the base of your neck. How are your shoulder blades engaged in your walking? Or not? What happens in your upper ribs? Carol's checking that she's not going to be on the camera. I'll move the camera a bit, Carol. And begin to notice if you go slower, like if you really slow down, does that influence the movement that goes on there for you? And then go a little bit faster than you normally would. And just see something about the speed of an action influence what happens in our self-image. So are the particular speeds that help us to include more of ourselves in our image or less of ourselves? And come to lying on your back. Notice as you're lying on your back, do you still feel any sense of the lesson that you just did? And again, you might remember on the first day I said, you know, that one of the aims of any segment, but of this segment as well, we were looking at some of the movements we were doing, if they could allow us to discover parts of our self-image, parts of ourselves that maybe we don't normally include in our self-image, which is the first thing, just that we can become more aware of all the parts of ourselves. But then to take that to another level of that all of ourselves, we can expand our self-image in the possibilities that are open to us. So not just that a part can be in our image, but they can be in our image in more and more orientations, in more and more movements that we do. So bend your knees to stand your feet. Notice where you're resting on your pelvis to do that. So if you think of the back of your pelvis and you think of the top of your pelvis down to the top of your sacrum down to your tailbone, Would you be resting a little bit more toward the top of your sacrum with your knees bent, or a little bit more down toward your tailbone with your knees bent? And just feel if changing the position of where your feet are and your legs influences that. So if you have your feet a little bit further away from you, does that change where you'd be resting on the back of your pelvis? If you had your feet wider or closer together. And see if you could find a position where your legs could be, which may not be your habitual, but may not be, where you feel you're more resting on the middle of your sacrum. So is there something about the position of where your legs are that you could find that I feel I'm a little bit more toward the middle of my sacrum, which is basically a little bit more in line with your hip joints. And notice where your breathing is when you're more on the middle of your sacrum, what's available in the breath in your low belly. And then just again explore what happens to the breathing in my low belly if I'm on a different part, if I'm more rolled toward my lower back on my sacrum, or more toward my tailbone. So how does this simple sort of biomechanical position, if you like, of where your pelvis is resting influence where your breath can be? And then come back, if you can, to the position where your legs can be, where you can feel you're more smack dab in the middle. I think that was a Rai Kuda song. Right in the middle of your sacrum. Okay. So now begin to go. So you're now going to do a little 12 to 6 movement from that midpoint of your sacrum. So you're going to go a little bit down in the direction you're feeling the weight roll across the bottom of your sacrum. And you go a little bit up. And you're beginning to sense or finding a way that your chin will immediately respond to that movement. So that as soon as your pelvis begins to tilt, your chin tilts. So we're not looking for a sequential movement here where, you sort of roll your pelvis and you feel the movement gradually go through you. We're looking for a much more simultaneous movement. And begin to feel this really important connection between your sacrum, or the bottom of your pelvis, and the very top of your neck. This freedom in the bottom of your pelvis that can really allow many of us to feel more possibility in the top of our neck. So again, it'd be a little bit like, your pelvic clock. So as soon as your sacrum goes to 12, your head goes to 12. As soon as your sacrum changes direction, your pelvis changes direction, your head changes direction. And feel what that asks through the middle of you. when we really think about these two ends of your spine. So your chin goes up and down, your sacrum goes up and down. And gradually begin, some of you are already doing this, but expand that movement so that you can begin to feel you could make it larger. And that it really stays a tilt. So your lower back really will have to arch. Your very low belly will have to lengthen. Can you remember from the pelvic clock? And what would your legs do? Can you remember that helped this movement to go through? Can you remember that as we went down, as your pelvis went down in the direction of your tailbone, that you felt your legs got a little bit lighter, that your thighs started to engage a little bit? And that as you went the other way, your feet began to really gently push. But that it wasn't that your legs were propelling the movement. It was this movement of your pelvis going up through to your head that asked your legs to respond this way. And then begin to feel, what do your shoulder blades do as you do this? What do your shoulder blades do? Are they lying there pretty passively? Because you can feel as you do this 12-6 movement of your pelvis, your ribs are moving relative to your shoulder blades. But can you also feel that your shoulder blades are going to move relative to your ribs? That they're not simply lying there in place, but they're actively doing something. Okay, now wherever you have your arms, could you just change their orientation a little bit? So if you've had, no, you can keep them where they are, but if you've had the palms up, could you put the palms down? If you've had your thumb up, just simply change the rotation of your arms and feel, does that influence what happens in your shoulders and shoulder blades by changing that position of your arms? And then continue the movement and see, is it easy for me here to still feel that my shoulder blades can be involved in this movement of my pelvis up and down? My chin's still going up and down. And remember, there was something also in that pelvic clock lesson that we did, that as you went down towards your sacrum, that your sternum and your chin came closer towards each other. So it wasn't just that your chin came down, but that your sternum lifted up a little bit toward it. And then as your pelvis went the other way and your feet gently pressed, that your chin went up and your sternum went down a little bit. So that they weren't keeping the same relationship, but you could really feel something happening in your upper back. Okay. Could you put your arms out to the side? And notice again, are your palms up or down? Doesn't matter, whatever's comfortable for you. Continue this movement, continue this pelvic tilt, and feel, are my shoulders still involved? Can I still find a way that my shoulder blades are not just passive, but they're actually moving? And what do they do? What direction do they move in? And then try, if you've got your palms up, put them down. If you've got your palms down, put them up. Feel for a moment before you continue, what difference does that make to my shoulder blades, to my shoulders? And again, in this position, can you find this easy movement? This movement of your chin up and down, and that feeling this movement of the chin is coming from your upper neck. Could you have one palm up and one palm down? And still feel that your shoulders could be part of this movement. So you can see it's a really simple exploration we're doing here. We've returned to a movement you know really well, which is your pelvic tilt going through. And then we're seeing, how does the position of your arms influence it? Or could we find a way that your arms can still be in your image, responding in many different orientations? How about both arms up above your head on the floor? And again, just find the position where you want your arms, where you can still feel your shoulders are responding, your shoulder blades are doing something. And if you feel that one of your shoulders or both drop out of that image, just reorganize your shoulders. Put your arms in a slightly different position. So how can we find these different possibilities in our upper back? Maybe you could have one arm up and one arm down. And you can still feel this tilt over your sacrum, your legs responding, you're breathing down into your belly, that availability of your breath deep down into your pelvis. Does it make a difference if your arms are bent or straight? Because again, there's many ATMs we do with your arms in many different positions to find how we can still find this movement through this big upper junction. And that the position of our arms doesn't need to get in the way. To keep letting this movement go through. And then maybe you could begin to start as you just keep that tilt going. Up, down, up, down. So it's nearly like background. And you could begin to reach your arms up and down as if sort of like angel's wings. Huh? And that you can feel that it doesn't need to interfere with this movement of your pelvis and your head up and down. And of course, what's interesting for our learning is there a point where it does all of a sudden stop? And again, if you feel that you pause there. Notice what's happened to your breathing. You could have one arm sliding up and the other one down. Just play around. Just staying within what's really easy. Have a rest. So how do we get through this big junction in our upper back? We think a lot, often, about our pelvis and our hips. But this junction's just as important. Okay, bend your knees again. And this time, you're going to, again, remember what we were doing just a little bit yesterday where you were lifting one leg and dropping it. And just see, does that get through to your upper back now? Do you feel anything happen in your shoulders? In your chin, in your neck? Do you feel at any moment that maybe your chin gets pulled down or goes up? And what's that got to do with this freedom of your shoulders? And feel free to even exaggerate the movement a little bit. And really see, can you get a little bit more of this up-down movement in it? There's many ways you can lift a leg. You know, you can use side bending, you can use all sorts of things. But see if you could begin to find a connection at the moment to this sort of up-down movement. Okay, leave your feet where they are. And now begin to roll your pelvis up off the ground. So you've done this movement a lot like a spinal bridge. But again, we're not doing it in so much a sequence, but you feeling immediately that your head responds. Immediately as soon as you go to lift your pelvis, to start to peel it off the ground, that something happens in your head, your neck, your shoulders. And then gradually you just start lifting higher and higher and feeling all the time that something's changing in my neck, in my upper back. And as you continue to do this, just feel, try your arms in some different positions again. How does that influence? How can I still find this easy connection? And when does my pelvis go up? When does it go down? So to get my pelvis really high, where would my chin be? And can you feel that to really get your pelvis high, your chin comes down? It might not start that way at the beginning of the movement. But you can begin to feel this continuously changing curves in your back. So that as you sort of start off maybe rounding your low back, your chin goes up a little bit. And then as you keep going higher and your pelvis is lifting and you're getting more of it, you're starting to change to more of an arch in your low back, but your chin comes down. So this continually changing relationship. That no matter what your pelvis and legs do, something's responding in your upper back, in your shoulders, in your neck. And you can really feel that your legs aren't pushing your head away. Your legs aren't pushing your head away. So for some of you, you get to the top and then you push with your legs and your head pushes away. So your legs are really soft. They're pressing gently into the floor. So really feeling, the more you can feel, to get my pelvis high, where does my chin go? And what do my shoulder blades do? To let my chin go down, but my upper back peel off the floor. And then how do the curves change again as I roll down? So nothing, no part of your spine ever stops moving, ever stops adapting, responding. And have a rest. And get a sense of how's your breathing now. Where are you resting on your pelvis? Where are you resting on the back of your head? What's your sense of length along the back of you and the front of you? And come to your hands and knees again, like we were yesterday. Just really gently again, go back to that movement we were doing, just a few times of flexing and extending your ankles. And just begin to feel, when would it be easiest to tuck my feet under? What would I do? What would make sense in my low back and my pelvis to really feel that my toes could really tuck under? What happens between your shoulder blades? And then again, do the same thing with your head on the floor. This time with your hands in line with your head. For a start, so your head and you're on the top of your head. Again, patting as much as you need. You want to make yourself, you want to adapt the environment to you, to your comfort, to your needs. And again, do this movement of taking your feet, up and down. Feel what it does to your head when you take your toes under, when you take your toes back toward down. And then can you gradually begin to find a way that you could do this and it doesn't need, the position on the top of your head doesn't need to change. Or if it does, tiny little bit as you take your toes up and down. So you're finding the area on the top of your head. You just don't want one point, but that you've got a bit of a circle there, but you still know it's the top of your head. That you're not going toward your forehead. Okay, leave your toes bent up and go back to what we now did with the isosceles triangle. So leave and just reposition your hands. So you're more of an isosceles triangle. And take a moment to feel, how wide do I want my elbows to be? To feel that my shoulders can be soft and responsive. So do I want my elbows out really wide, or do I want my elbows a little bit more in by my side? And then again, begin to lift one knee. The other knee. So you've got your toes helping here. Your toes are tucked under. And you're really noticing the direction that you're taking your knee in. Is it going out to the side? Is it going straight up? And which is the direction that's going to most easily help you to lift your pelvis high? What's the direction? that's going to help you to really think of lifting your pelvis high into the air. And really feel how the toes can help you here, huh? So that you can sort of, it doesn't mean they do all the pushing, but it's a point of support for you, those toes. It's a point of balance. It's to help to give you a little bit more stability. And then maybe find a way that you could lift both knees. And again, you can do one at a time, but it's about getting your pelvis to be able to lift high into the air. And what's it got to do with this freedom of movement in your upper back? This freedom of movement in your shoulders. This softness in your neck. Softness in your belly. And breathing into your low belly. And again, really play around with where you want your elbows to be. How wide you want them, how wide you want your hands. So again, the wider we have our hands, obviously it gives us more stability. Yeah? Bigger base of support will always make us feel safer. So you're just finding what makes you feel safe here. And then, again, it's great to see lots of you taking rests whenever you want them. Could you, once you get your knees up, begin to walk your feet a little closer, but feeling every step is lifting your pelvis higher. Every step that you take is lifting your pelvis a little bit higher. Okay, have a rest on your back. So again, you know, if you thought you were going to lose your balance, what's the part of you that's really going to tighten? Well, everything, but some parts more. So if you're standing on one leg, what would be the thing that would really, what's going to come into action really quickly? Come up. Yeah, you're going to walk along a tightrope. Just imagine you're walking along a tightrope. If you start to lose, what happens up here? In your arms and your upper chest. Yeah. And are they soft? Can they be soft as they go out? What happens if they tighten? Can you sense that, what it's going to do? If your arms lock up, and then can you find a way that you can do it and your arms could be really soft? What's the difference in your balance? So these are all protective reactions. Yeah, your arms are designed to do these movements. It's how we do them that's the issue. Huh? If they're coming in with softness and adaptability, and this is all to do with anxiety. Fear of falling. Huh? Huh? Because, you know, you're completely safe here. Huh? Really. You can only fall to the floor, but for some of us, that's life-threatening. And I don't say that lightly. The mental map we have in our head is that it's life-threatening. something really bad could happen to us. Okay, back on the ground, on your hands and knees. So we're trying to find, in a way, through these lessons, how you can keep this softness. Yeah? And for you to begin to feel, when you feel a little bit threatened or challenged, what's happened. What's happened in my arms, in my upper back, which are meant to be free and responsive. It was really interesting, my little story. So Di and I went out bird watching at Lake Touchy-Wop, which I'd never been to, which is just out of Kerrang. Touchy-Wop. And it's really a salt, I think it's a salt lake, isn't it? Clay pan. So there's meant to be lots of birds. There were none, this particular lake. But it was really interesting. So, there was all mud, clay. And then you got to the salt, which was gorgeous. It was so crunchy and it was gorgeous. And then sort of went out again to a little bit of water. And I just had a pair of runners on. Yeah. And then all of a sudden there was just it just started to really rain. And it was really funny because we're both walking back, and the moment Di said, "Oh, this feels a bit slippery," I just went. Because I didn't have time to think about it, of course I didn't hurt myself. I just did this beautiful fall onto my pip and laughed and could get up again. Yeah. And the outfit was gorgeous. It was just smeared. It was just covered in mud. The outfit was gorgeous. But it's really interesting. So what happens if I'm a person who's walking around and they're scared of falling? What's going to happen? They're going to fall even more. It's more likely that they're going to fall. Because they don't have that freedom of action. No? They don't have it. So we're really playing a lot here with fear of falling. Really innate, deep in our systems. So back onto your hands and knees once more. So really be aware, because we're going into, for some of you, more challenge. Watch your self-talk. What's your self-talk? So as soon as you feel your self-talk going, this is not safe, and it might not be that, but, I don't like doing this. I wish you'd change the lesson. No, go for it. As long as you're staying within what's easy. As long as you're staying within what's easy. If you're evoking your fear of falling, I'd say don't do it. And it was really interesting. If you can get the alignment, you're fine. It was why I'm saying that is, so now I've got the responsibility if she breaks her neck. But, there was this really interesting story Feldenkrais told about, and some of you may have seen, he got David Ben-Gurion to stand on his head. I think he was in his 70s or on the beach. There's the classic photo of David Ben-Gurion, on his head with his elbows on his knees on the beach. And apparently the story goes that they knew that Feldenkrais was teaching him. Feldenkrais took a long time to get David Ben-Gurion to this point where he could stand on his head. And all of these people kept writing to him and saying, you can't do this. You can't do this with a man of this age. You can't do it with a man who, he might hurt him. He's the Prime Minister of Israel. How can you take this risk? So David Ben-Gurion was quite happy doing it, apparently. Because he took it really slowly. But, it was interesting then Feldenkrais sort of turning it around to saying, so the risk Feldenkrais was taking was actually huge, because everyone's going to blame him. And that's the thing you're going to run into with your clients as well. When am I prepared to know that this is okay? Or it's much better, as Martina said, go back. If you don't feel safe, if you don't, go back. But there's many times with clients when I will push them doing things that I know they can do, but they've got all of these maps, these schema that this isn't safe to do. I shouldn't be doing this. But then I've got to provide the environment that they can feel safe enough to do it. So have another go. So, good question. What would be happening that Karen's got a lot of pressure on her head? Do you mind if we have a look, Karen? Let's have a look. Because again, it's a lot, if you're not used to taking pressure on your head, it's going to feel like pressure, isn't it? So can you bring your hands back in a little bit closer to your knees, Karen? A little bit closer to your knees? Huh? So we're getting our hands in between. Yeah? Can you see it wouldn't feel as good if we had our hands on the same line? But if we can get our hands in there to be the first thing she's going to sort of take the weight onto. Huh? So toes under and she goes forward. So as soon as she puts the toes under, she's put more weight on her head. So how do we get Karen on your hands and knees, Karen? Yeah, no, just hands and knees, Karen. Lift your head. How could Karen learn that as she takes her toes under, Karen, no, this can go backwards, Karen, as you take your toes under, backwards. No? So we're not losing the weight on her feet. No? Because if she goes forward to do it, she's already piled all the weight. No? So she still wants to go forward as the first thing. That's okay. So how could this go? Yeah. And down. And this is because she's not used to lengthening her ankles. Yeah? And again, Karen. Beautiful. Yeah? Now leave your toes under. And now put your head down. And see, does that feel any different straight away, Karen? Can you feel you can still now have a bit of weight on your toes? There you go. Yeah, rock back. There. So bring your head a little bit closer to you, Karen, to help her. Does this make sense that that's going to help her to keep her weight back a little bit if we can get her head closer to her pelvis? And now begin to lift one knee. Does that feel a little easier, Karen? Yeah. So can you see how those just very initial directions, that initial weight shift is already, huh? So if I'm someone who always likes to, yeah, because what's going to stop most people from going down into that, where you're heading toward a squat, everything. Have you ever seen an Indian or anyone in a full squat who hasn't got a long back? They're not there. You haven't got your back arched to have your heels on the ground. It doesn't make sense. It makes sense if you're on your toes, but not if you're on your heels. It just doesn't make sense. And these are the movement patterns that he's embedding in these ATMs. But what are they doing? Yeah, could they go down to the floor doing that? They can't get their pelvis anywhere near. They do a different shape. No, they do a different shape when they're going to go down into a lift. Yeah? They're different things. Yeah? But try it out for yourselves. You know, go back onto your hands and knees. If you want to lift your knees away from the floor, is it easier to do? So just on your hands and knees, forget about your head. Is it easier to do with your back in extension or flexion? What's going to lighten your knees? How high can you get if your back's extending? What happens? And your weight's not then going back, is it, onto your feet? No? Okay, so go back again and try your walking one more time. Just one more time. Finding the position for your head. Feeling this really important thing that we take really lightly. How do we tuck our toes under? How much that's got to do with setting this movement up to allow our knees to get light. And of course, if you think about it, how much work, how far is your pelvis? So we've got Silvana here, her head's here, her knees are here. How much work is she going to have to do to get her pelvis up above her head if her head's a long way from her knees? Yeah? So what's going to make it easier to get your pelvis high above your head? Probably your head closer to your knees. Because if they're too far away, no, you've got to do a lot bigger. And then you're just walking. And maybe some of you will find a way that one knee could begin to rest on one elbow. And again, where do you want your elbows to be? Because if your elbows are really wide, so this is really then asking, because once you get the elbow, you've still got to have this softness here. Yeah? To get the elbow to your knee, you've hunkered down again. So you can see with Dan, because he's got his elbows so wide, it's not easy to get his elbow to his knee. Rest on your back. So all these different ways we're exploring of different orientations of finding our pelvis to be free. But more specifically in these lessons, what it's got to do with this freedom in our upper back. Your upper back. Yeah? And once you can begin to see it often as that, that's what we're exploring, or that's a different context, then maybe it's not so important if I can do this, but I'm simply exploring, staying within my level of comfort, just finding, what can I find out? What do these lessons give me an opportunity to find out about this part of me? Bend your feet up. And just go back to your carp again. Lifting one leg, lifting both legs, and feeling your pelvis can lift as you drop your foot. So if you're doing one leg, really feel the pelvis on that side lifts as you drop your foot. And really feeling how much this has got to do with this freedom, and to really begin to get a sense of you clarifying your hip joint. So if you're beginning to feel at all that as you drop your leg, that your lower back is arching, that's not it. That's not what we're after, your lower back arching. Yeah, so as you lift your leg, no, just one, and then you drop it down, that you don't want the lower back to arch. You want the pelvis to lift. It's your hip that's lifting. So your back stays long. And just really feel, is it different one side to the other? For some of you, it'll be really different. One leg going down than the other. What happens if you put your hands under your pelvis? So we lift your pelvis a little bit higher, so that you can really feel now that as you lift your leg, your pelvis rounds a little bit, your back gets long, and then the leg can drop without you having to arch your back. Then try your fists under your pelvis. Make it even higher. And you're still feeling that your pelvis could lift a little bit as you... Where does your chin have to go? And make sure, sorry, I should have clarified this. With your arms under, make sure your shoulders are still free. Yeah? Shoulder blades are still available for movement. Okay, so now could you lift your legs and lift your pelvis so that you could place your hands under your pelvis? So your legs are high up over you, your pelvis is up in the air. So you can sort of put your elbows on the floor and hold your pelvis as if you were going to swing your legs overhead. Yeah? And find a way to do this where your head is soft. So where would your chin have to be to get you into this position? Can you still nod your head a little bit there? Is your head still free? And then think of reaching one leg down toward the floor. It's not going to get to the floor, but you're going in that direction. So your knees are bent and one knee is going down toward the floor. And then the other one. And you feel free to counterbalance. And really, what's the difference in this movement if you think that as the foot is reaching to the floor, you point your toes or you flex your foot? So it's not above your head. You're taking your foot down to standing again. You're taking your foot down to the floor. And what has to happen in your curves in your back? Your shoulders still free. The base of your neck still free. Let it down. And then once more, just swing your legs and then drop them. Swing your legs up above your chest, and then you drop them and your pelvis pops up into the air. Your pelvis pops up into the air. Okay, so I love it. Feldenkrais always was getting people watching. Joel, can you keep going? No, you're doing it beautifully. Look at this. Yeah? But can you see how those curves have to keep changing? Yeah? Can you feel that, Joel? His whole spine is moving. Yeah? There's not any part of him. So don't feel you have to get there. It's not important. And the biggest thing is feel that your head will not lift away from the floor. Yeah? That as you do this, that your head stays on the floor. Okay, leave it. Come up to standing. So it's more and more about letting something happen through here, letting something change in the belly, in your back. So go for a walk now and see, does anything feel different in your upper back, in your shoulders, in your neck? And could you maybe begin to feel now that even if you walked really slowly, something would happen up here. Something would still happen up there. So for many, what I see a lot in my clients is that as soon as you get them to go too slow, this just tends to do nothing. Just stays in one orientation. So what we're looking for is that even when we're walking really slowly, this is just naturally a part of our image. Something happens there. Okay, so just break into little groups of 3 or 4 and have a little chat about your experiences of that lesson or what you thought was interesting, what you discovered. Maybe share what you feel differently in yourselves. Is there something in your image that's woken up in a new way?